really know whether to thank him for that, do you? Yeah, if I were young, it might have been okay to get away with that, Stuart, but thank you. Okay, so I am here to talk to you today about how important it is for you to understand about psychology, actually. We call it, or you call it, a lot of people call it the soft stuff. A lot of people kind of shy away from it, but actually your biggest resource is the people. And the last speaker's just shown us the value of neuroscience and understanding how people make choices, understanding how we function. Actually, I think it's vital that every leader understands something about psychology. It's not the soft stuff, it's the hard stuff. And I really know that because although I am the world's oldest coach, which I'm now going to use on my website, I think, thank you, Stuart, and I teach this, and I know it inside out when I'm coaching in organisations, when I'm working with people, when I am being a business owner and managing my teams at work, I forget it. And that's an honest confession. And it's a confession that I offer you to say, I know how hard it is to spin all those plates, to think about your growth strategy, to think about your marketing strategy, to think about employment law, to think about finances, and actually still remember to motivate and inspire people and get to know every individual person within your team and what specifically motivates them. For that reason, I actually have my own coaches, Stuart being one of them, to keep me on track with this. So today, a whistle-stop tour, really. I'm going to take you through some stories, some anecdotes, some pieces of research that will help you perhaps think about what you could do differently in a really simple way with your team members. My goal is always to make it accessible, to make it real, to demystify it. And in fact, when I started in this work, I wasn't content with positive thinking or results just happening because, you make people feel better. I really wanted to know why. And for a while, we struggled to find out why. And then along came neuroscience. And neuroscience has actually given us loads of hard, scientific-based psychological evidence that shows us actually when we do certain things, people's brains light up in different ways and they perform better. So a few tips for you coming up. Most leadership experts now agree without question that psychology is not taught enough to leaders and managers. And I think we would also all agree that most people get promoted to leadership or management positions because they're good at what they do, because they're technically good, not because they're psychologists, not because they're experts in human motivation. They need to be. We also know, don't we, that people leave managers and they don't leave companies. It's very well documented. So I urge you to look at the reasons why, and here are some of the reasons why. If someone feels engaged, happy, excited, motivated at work, evidence suggests that performance, productivity can increase by as much as 30%. I say to that, duh. Like, is it really surprising? Don't we just know that? If we're happy, we work harder, we do more, we want to do more for the people that we like. Another piece of scientific finding, we are more likely to do something if we're asked by someone we like. Quite obviously, but these are really useful things for you to hold in your mind. Now, the interesting thing about this statistic is that what contributes to our sense of engagement is not the overall company mission statement and values and all the things that drew us to be there in the first place, but it is very specifically the person who's managing you. Very specifically the person who's managing you. And there have been loads and loads of studies of why people leave jobs. Saratoga Institute in the States did a 2-year study with 60,000 exit interviews, and 80% of the people said they left because of a bad boss. Gallup did a survey with 1 million people, and 80% of people left because of their relationship with their boss. So it's really key. And actually, the smallest tweaks can make the biggest difference. Until we know what works, we're going to keep on doing what we've done. So how do we do it? How do we, with everything else that we have to do as leaders of people and managers, how do we kind of also make people motivated and wanting to be productive and work for us? Well, in order to do that, we kind of need to understand what happens when we are and when we're not. And here again, we're going to look at neuroscience and the findings from that. Can you see that? I can't really see it from here. So this says, what does stress do to us? We probably know this, don't we? When we are stressed, we have a threat response. When we have a threat response, all sorts of things happen to our brain, because our brain in that threat response is flooded with adrenaline, cortisol, loads of stress-inducing chemicals. Our IQ drops as much as 20 points. That's a pretty big drop. If we've got an average IQ, it can take us into imbecile category, actually, pretty quickly. That we go into black and white, all or nothing thinking. We go into a closed mindset. We have no ability to generate alternatives. It's win or lose, do or die when we're stressed. Why is that? Anyone know why we do that when we're stressed? From even if I could say it, evolutionary perspective?
We had to survive, so we shut everything else down so that we actually...
Totally. Excellent. We had to fight. So this is pure survival. Our brains have not caught up with evolution and where we are in the world now. Our brains still react as if we were facing a wild bear who was about to kill us. And if we're facing a wild bear who's about to kill us, we don't need to do blue sky thinking, do we? Or have a cozy coaching conversation in that moment. We need to win or lose. We need to fight or flee. Unfortunately, that kind of response happens now for different reasons. And specifically, it happens if people feel uncertain at work, if they fear they may lose their job. And I think as business owners, sometimes it's hard for us to actually realize, I don't know if this is just me or if any of you feel the same way, but sometimes it astonishes me just how much people's jobs really matter to them. Recently, just this week, I ran a grief recovery workshop. I advertised this for people who are experiencing loss of different kinds. Most people who showed up had had a traditional, conventional bereavement. And one person who showed up was a middle manager in an organisation who hadn't even lost her job. When everyone introduced themselves, and you can imagine it was quite emotional, she introduced herself by saying, "My company is going through a merger and acquisition at the moment, and it's not the same anymore." And I have to admit, I think all of us were a bit challenged, no one died, and it took me a while to realise that this woman was in a deep state of stress because of that. She said, I'm not in a relationship, I live on my own, I don't have family nearby, my work is everything to me. So we need to really sometimes, as hard-driving entrepreneurs who are looking for growth for our companies, actually step into the other people's shoes and realise what are the things that cause them stress. Other things that have been listed to cause people stress are having really endlessly high expectations put upon them, relentless high expectations. And I know I do this too. I remember last year we ran a conference that was similar to this. It really went well. The next day, I went into the office. We were having one of those kind of congratulatory kind of post-mortem. Yeah, this was good, that was good. The girls had their feet up, so, yeah, it really went well. Within minutes, I said, okay, next year, this is what we need to do at the conference. I've had some fantastic ideas. Next year, we need to do this differently. Let's raise the bar. Let's get 180 people next year instead of 150. And they went, stop it. I actually said, give us a day at least to get over this. It's a really recognised form of stress where we are driving forward as business owners and actually putting a huge amount of pressure on the people who are working for us. So, small things can create stress responses. Being in an open plan office with people you don't like, team dysfunction, so many things. What do we do about it? Well, we can address the presenting issues. We can address the things that are causing it. But we can also do something different ourselves. This is a really rubbish slide, isn't it? From where I'm standing, I can't see a thing. Can anyone? Shall I just keep telling you what's on here? So this is, I don't think it was meant to look like this. Where's my marketing department now? Okay. The antidote to stress is attention. This is just really simple. An antidote to stress is attention. If you consider when we're stressed that our brains flood with all these stress-inducing hormones and shut our thinking down, when we're not stressed, and very specifically when we're given attention, and in this case, attention means another human being sitting with us. This doesn't happen if we're using technology. It means someone looking at us, and it means someone listening to us with interest. Very simply, eye contact, listening with interest, and being present. When we're given attention, because these are fundamental human needs, so fundamental that in some cultures, people die from lack of attention. People actually wither away and die if they are kind of sent to Coventry in certain tribes. Anyone as old as me remember the dreadful crisis in Romania where children were put in orphanages? And it was that they were fed, if you remember, but they didn't grow. And they didn't grow because they didn't get attention. So attention does all the opposite things to us from stress. Attention opens up our thinking. Attention lights up areas of our brain that are only otherwise lit up when we're in love. Isn't that amazing? And you know, when you're in love, do you remember being in love? Do you remember, you are on peak performance, aren't you? You're witty. You amaze yourself at how quick you are. You look great. You take care of yourself. Everything is just going so well until you get to the point where you think, okay, I'm in here now. Let's just, stop all that. But actually, I can't keep it up. But actually, you can get a shot of that kind of feeling, and you can give people a shot of that kind of feeling by giving attention in that way. So what does that actually mean? It means sitting and listening to people without saying anything. Some people here there are some people here that I know very well who are very familiar with the work of Nancy Kline. Now, Nancy Kline is a woman who is traveling the world, teaching the world to listen and to give attention. She's a guru in our world. In fact, I have to say, Stuart, she's probably the oldest coach in the world, I think. I think she takes that title. She works with world leaders, with global organizations, and she merely encourages people to Do what I've said. Sit, listen for 5 minutes maybe, just 3 minutes, and let people speak. Not jump in, not be an expert, not interrupt, not think you know, but actually hold that person in a space that says, you are the expert in your world. You are the expert on you. And how can I presume to think that I know better than you what you need to do? So we have taught this over and over and over again in organisations. And although maybe you're sitting there going, oh, it sounds like a counselling course, it isn't. It works. Let me give you a couple of examples. In GP surgeries, they ask the GPs, how long do you think you listen for when a patient comes in? What do you think they said? They thought they listened for 3 minutes. They thought. Then they watched them. How long do you think they listened for? 20 seconds. 20 seconds before they were there. Like, oh, seen this before. Yeah, I think I'll ask a couple of questions that are really useful. Perhaps I'll diagnose something. Perhaps I'll start. Ever been in there when they start writing the prescription before you've even finished? So then what happens? You know, your thinking's been hijacked. You haven't necessarily said what you wanted to. Some people go to the doctor and they say something first that they don't really mean before they get to the thing that they really wanted to say. So what they found was appointment times were really much longer than the 10 minutes because the people's thinking had been hijacked. So guess what? They asked the doctors, just sit there, zip it, look interested, and listen for 3 minutes. What do you think happened? Absolutely, appointment times dropped. People got to feel heard, say what they needed to. Very often they actually kind of knew themselves what it was they needed or wanted. It's a really simple principle. I remember teaching this in an engineering company in Huddersfield. I'm not stereotyping too much, but make of that what you will. I was met with a room full of folded arms, like, oh God, here she is, someone from Fluffy Towers again, telling us to listen to people. There was one particular guy who was a bodybuilder who really daunted me because the whole time he just sat there like with a chicken, not live, it was roasted. And like those protein shakes, just like eating and drinking and a load of old rubbish. Anyway, he left the room and said, I'll give it a try. He came back the next time we met and said, you know, it bloody works. He said, I had to have a performance review with somebody, a guy who had really messed up big time. Ordinarily, I would have just gone straight in there and told him what I thought he had done wrong. He would have become defensive. We'd have probably got into nearly a fight. So I thought I'd try what this woman said. And he just said to the guy, you know, tell me what happened. And he sat back and he listened and he waited. And the guy actually talked himself into a kind of confession and an apology, and they came to a really good agreement in the end really quickly. Bear this one in mind. In times when you think you feel like you have to say something, fill in the gaps, find a solution, be the expert, just experiment. Sit back and let that other person speak. We use a word that helps us do that, which is wait. Why am I talking? It's a really nice one to remember, just as a trigger for yourself. See what happens. In meetings, it's a really beautiful thing to do. It ignites people's thinking. Imagine, this is what we advocate. Everyone has 5 minutes each when you first get into a meeting to just say what they want to. Most of us are done in 5 minutes, actually. It's quite hard to go on for longer. And then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And usually there's a really generative approach that one person's thinking knocks onto another's, and they build. Compare that with the usual meeting. I'm sure you all have meetings like I do. You sit down with an agenda, someone says something, and someone else, no, we did that in 1985, it absolutely isn't going to work again, I was here. And before you know it, you've all lost the meeting. You come out of the meeting 2 hours later going, what happened? And what are we going to do as a result of that? Try this, it makes it really, really easy, and again, economical. The other thing is, it allows people who don't normally speak first an equality of airtime. People who are more reflective, people who are more introverted in an organisation, instead of bringing in people to kind of do diagnostics about what type of person we are, oh, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, and how do we speak to one another? You don't need to. Just allow everyone that same time. Okay. Dare to try it and see what happens. Dare to try it at home and see what happens. It works in all relationships. As does praise and recognition. Praise and recognition are basic human needs again. This is all about our evolution and our brains not having really caught up with the world we live in. Fundamentally, we all still need these things. I'm currently working with coaching a woman who has been in a large organisation for years. She's been a senior manager in the organisation, very much known. Everyone loves her. She loves everyone. She's like a kind of figurehead within this organisation. She's just been appointed to the board, and it's not going well. She's not happy. And they've given me as a coach. They're paying, obviously, we charge quite a lot of money. They're paying me a lot of money. And you know what? All there is wrong is she's not getting any praise or feedback. No one is telling her how she's doing. They don't need to pay me. They just need to do that for her. In research of, I think, about 12,000 people, they asked them, what would you prefer? Would you prefer a 5% pay increase, or would you prefer more praise and recognition? 83% of people, astonishingly, said that they would want more praise and recognition than they want tangible financial rewards for what they're doing. It's huge. In fact, evidence suggests that we need 5 parts praise to 1 part criticism in all relationships. That's what we should be striving for, a 5-to-1 ratio. Evidence also suggests that we can take up as much as 13-to-1 before we feel a bit nauseated, actually. Give that a try too. These are the things that oil people's motivation. And in addition to that, millennials seem to need it more and want it more. They are less fixated on the tangible rewards and more motivated by the work environment and the sense of climate where they are. Okay, another great slide here, all in shadow. We're more likely to do something if we own it, a really fundamental coaching principle. If we feel like we've kind of bought into the idea, come up with the idea, we are more likely to do it. I don't know if anyone heard about the work on non-attendance at GP surgeries or in the NHS generally. The government noticed that 60 million appointments a year in the NHS were no-shows. They reckon that will cost them £700 million. This is serious stuff, isn't it? people not phoning in time to give the appointment to someone else. They called in a guy called Robert Cialdini. And Robert Cialdini is a great psychologist who specializes in looking at influence and persuasion and motivation. For those of you who are interested in motivating people who work for you, his book, Influence and Persuasion, is a great read. They called him in and said, what can you do about this? He did two things. He did two things that brought about a 31.4% improvement to the attendance rates. The first one was get a commitment from people in two ways. Usually, you know, the receptionist might write a card and give it to you with your time on it. This time, the receptionist gave the patient the card, said, write this down. The patient wrote it themselves. In addition to that, they asked for a commitment, a verbal commitment, that if they were going to not show up in time, they would let them know. They said, yeah. When people make a commitment, they want to honour it, particularly if they have been actively involved in that commitment. It doesn't work in the same way if your manager says, so I'm putting you down as 10 out of 10 committed to do that by next Wednesday. You will delete that. If you say that yourself, there is an internal compulsion to make it happen. The other thing that he did was really interesting. I want you to think about this in terms of your own businesses. He changed the screen message that said, last month, 75 people didn't show up. And he changed it to say, last month, 197 people did show up. Why? Why would that work? It's positive, yeah. You want to be part of the success group, absolutely, absolutely. By saying last month 95% of people didn't, you know, how many people didn't turn up, is kind of normalizing that as okay, isn't it? More to the point, the only ones that were seeing it were the ones who were showing up. So they were kind of getting the message, it's okay if I don't next time. People, and have you noticed that this has crept into other things? I've noticed, I spend most of my life on the M1, I think. But now there are signs that say the majority of people take their litter home. Have you seen that? So there's a real encouragement to be part of the success group. Think about your businesses. What behaviours are you unconsciously condoning and making okay? So to get commitment, learn to ask some great coaching questions. Learn to ask, who can support you with this? What do you need to make this happen? You know, when do you think you can get this to me? How can you do this in a way that fits with you and the rest of your work commitments? Where are you going to find the resources to do it? Open questions so that somebody gives their own commitment to the answer. I want to give you a couple more things because these are really important. Another psychological term is about self-fulfilling expectancy events. What that means is what we expect of ourselves and others determines how we behave, and how we behave determines the outcome, quite simply. I did loads of work with Betterware. Anyone work at Betterware here? I love Betterware. It was one of my favourite clients, a really down-to-earth, old-school company. That they used to put leaflets through the doors, and like Avon, and sell things for the home. Maybe now they have got a more technological approach, I don't know, but this was some years ago. When I first went to work for them, they all talked about Big Week. They said, oh, it's Big Week coming up. And I said, well, what is Big Week? And they said, every year, Big Week, we double our sales. I was like, wow, that's amazing. How do you do it? They said, oh, we just do, because it's Big Week. And I said, well, why isn't it Big Week every week then, if it can just happen like that? And they were like, oh, no, you only do it on Big Week. And that's exactly what this is about. What you expect of yourselves and others, you're likely to get. There's an experiment in the 60s in high schools in America by a guy called Professor Rosenthal, who went into class after class after class of elementary school children, looked at them, came back, said to the teachers, these 6 are going to be late bloomers. These 6 people, keep an eye on them, because whilst they're in the middle range now, you're going to find that they're going to have a talent spurt. So the teachers were like, okay, fine. Teachers obviously changed their behaviour somewhat to those children, had higher expectations of those children, and almost without fail, all the children who'd been identified as late bloomers did indeed start blooming later. He was being paid by the schools for this. It was a nice gig. And in the end, the schools said to him, look, this is amazing. Can you tell us what your research is, what your approach is? He said, I haven't got one. I just pick them at random. Absolutely true. And there are countless stories about that. So my question to you is, what are you expecting of yourselves? We all limit our expectations. What are you expecting of your companies? What are you expecting of people around you? How can you create your own version of Big Week in your businesses to help you grow? That's mind-blowing, isn't it? They all doubled their sales. How much are we limiting ourselves? The kind of negative side, because there's a positive and negative side. We can think big about it, we can limit ourselves. Negative side, just I want to point out to you to be aware of, is in a specific situation when someone in your organisation has been promoted perhaps from lower down the ranks. If someone's been in your company for years and years and years and started at the bottom, and they end up near the top, there is a tendency for you, for them, and for other people in the organisation to want to hold them where they were. They'll never forget that she was Sue from the call centre, even if she is the MD. So as managers of people, you need to do some work around that to actually set those expectations higher. The other thing to watch out for is something called homeostasis, which is actually a biological term which refers to any living system's tendency to revert to a stable state. So if we're really hot or if we're really cold outside, our temperature regulates and remains the same, and so does our breathing, and so does our pulse and all those other things. And so does a company, and so does a team. It's like an unconscious force that takes us back to doing it the way we've always done it. And those of us who are involved in training and development, going in there, doing all wonderful interventions, everyone goes, that was great. We know there is a high chance a lot of the time that we'll go back in 6 months' time, a year's time, and it'll be, what? The oldest coach came in? Oh yeah, I don't know what she was talking about. So you need to harness all these things that I've talked about, ways of praising people, ways of giving people attention, minimizing stress, setting your expectations. This needs to be a continuous piece of work for you to get really, really curious about the people who are working for you and how you can truly get the best out of them. Oh, that's the wrong slide. One last thing I wanted to say was about motivation. We tend to motivate people the way we motivate ourselves, and that's a mistake. Everybody motivates themselves differently, particularly either towards or away from. Towards what they want, away from what they don't. And in my experience, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners motivate away from. So why do you want success? Because I want to be rich and famous. Or why do you want success? Because I don't want to be poor like my parents were, or I don't want to live like I did when I was younger. And listening to how people motivate themselves is really key to you motivating them. I wrote a book a few years ago after years of moaning about not having written a book. And go, I haven't written a book. Yeah, I drove everyone mad, I think. And people used to come along, all these coaches who surround me, and go, picture yourself in Waterstones, signing your books, and picture. It didn't touch me. That wasn't what I was looking for. Eventually, someone came along and said, okay, imagine Stuart has got 3 books out now, and so have all the people that you've taught on your course, and you're standing there and you haven't got a book written. Wow, did that work? Did that work? I was like, yeah, the bastards, I'm going to get one out as well. So get curious. These tiny changes can make the biggest difference. We are dealing with a resource of tens or hundreds or thousands of people who all have a cocktail of needs, wants, history, psychology, ways of motivating themselves, how much praise they need. And to be a really effective leader, as well as spinning all those other plates that you do, you need to really think about that too. I'm out of time. Thank you for your attention, your openness. Appreciate it.